Welcome to Ancient Faith Today Live. This is Father Tom Soroka. I'm so glad that you're with us today. We have a pretty hot topic, boy, that ever since this thing hit the announcement, there has been a lot of online stirring about it. And I want to say with some peace and some truth, I think some people are taking this the wrong way. Anybody can be criticized, and I think we all need to be open to criticism. Next week, we're going to talk about young men. What are some of the issues that are distorting the minds of young men? But today, we're talking about young women. And it is no secret that this has been talked about for several years now. When we talk about the movement toward the Orthodox faith, there is a kind of disparity where there are more young men entering the Orthodox Church than there are young women. And I think it's a fair question to ask why that is. Why are young men entering at a greater rate than young women? However, let's take a breath. Take a breath. The title of this show is not The Answer. The title of the show is not The Answer. The title of this show is to ask the question, why are young women very interested in the occult, in witchcraft, in paganism? Why is that becoming so popular among them? If you cannot have a conversation about that, if you are incapable of even sort of pondering the question of why they are interested in that, this show is not for you. The show is not for you. Go watch something else. We are trying simply to understand, why are young women so interested in the occult? The title of the show is not, why are young women not interested in becoming Orthodox? That's a whole different story. But does anybody have any concern? Do any of you who are complaining online about this title, do you have any concern at all that young women are showing tremendous interest in the occult? If you're not, I think if you're an Orthodox Christian and you're not concerned that young women are interested in the occult, I don't know what, like, check your pulse. I don't understand why this would make that, just the mere title would make so many people angry. This is perplexing to me. Maybe I live in a bubble. I don't understand. But from my recent interactions with young women who are entering the church, they have told me this is a real thing. This is real. And it's a problem. The early church, the book of Acts, discusses it in great detail. But somehow, if we want to look at the problem, and I think it is a problem, that young women in this country are rejecting, and we'll look at all of this, organized religion, they're rejecting Christianity, and they are sometimes embracing paganism, neo-paganism, witchcraft, Wicca. Why? So let's look at this, okay? Let's take a breath. Let's calm down. Let's discuss this with open hearts, open minds, to try to figure out, what's the problem here? What's the problem? All right. So if you want to join in on the discussion, and you want to join in on the discussion in a way that is helpful, in a way that is respectful, join us at youtube.com/Ancient Faith Ministries. We'll be happy to have you there. If you're there not to discuss, if you're there to make accusations, you're going to go. We're not going to have it. You have to be calm about this, okay? Very, very important. Laura Wilson, the clarification you're making now wouldn't be necessary if you didn't write your announcement like clickbait. Look, the announcement, let me read the announcement right here. It says, the recent rise in young people embracing the Orthodox Christian faith has led some to ask why young women aren't entering at the same rate as young men. Is the answer a rising interest in divination and paganism? What's wrong with that? That's the question. The question is, if they're leaving Christianity and they're becoming pagans, why is that happening? That's it. It's a simple question. All right, here we go. So, youtube.com/Ancient Faith Ministries, facebook.com/Ancient Faith Ministries. Also, you can send us a text message to 206-5012, 412-206-5012. All right, so let's bring up the first slide. Let's get started here. Now, this topic is not simply in reaction to the idea that young women aren't becoming Orthodox. Obviously, young women are becoming Orthodox. They're becoming Orthodox all over the country. But the disparity is somewhat alarming. And there is spirituality that young women are being brought into. That's the problem. The problem is that there is a spirituality that young women are attracted to, and that is the occult. The occult and occultic ways, whether it is considered, and I'm sort of using this term as a kind of catch-all, witchcraft, neo-paganism, Wicca, right? All of these things in our Orthodox Christian understanding have to do with Satan. They have to do with evil. They have to do with the demonic. We should never want anyone, young men or young women, to be involved in such things. Ever. Old men, old women, no one should want this. So we need to be honest about that. I think my alarm is that any young women are interested in this at all. It's shocking. I was blissfully ignorant about this until about 2 or 3 months ago. I had no idea. And then I had many young women say, oh yes, this is a thing. They don't talk about it a lot, and you don't go on TikTok, but it's all over TikTok. And so let's look at some of these issues to see, why the interest. I think, we already know what it is. We already know that things demonic are not helpful. They are not good. But the question is why? What is the attraction? Why are young women specifically so interested in these particular things? Because they are not good. They are not healthy. they will not lead to anything that is good or helpful. All right, so look at this next slide, the second slide here. Now, I got to tell you, this is an absolute, I'm telling you the truth. I'm not lying. I was doing my slides. I was making my slides, and I went and clicked on the slide, and all the slides disappeared. So the last 20 minutes before the show, I was making up all the slides again. And I had very nice looking slides, and I just kind of had to throw these together as best as I could. So I apologize, but I can't explain why all these slides disappeared. And then when I tried to log into the show, I couldn't log into the show. And I'm not lying. I swear this is what happened. Look at these headlines. I just grabbed like 5 of them, okay? The US witch population has seen an astronomical rise. These are all from major publications. Toil and Trouble Misunderstood. Rise in Witchcraft forces a rethink of outdated views. The Witchcraft Generation, the New Statesman says. Another headline says, we're in the middle of a witch moment. Hip witchcraft is on the rise in the US. And then finally it says, the growing trend of modern day witchcraft and how it's shaping retail. That one, I actually didn't notice either. And then somebody pointed it out to me and they said, go into a store and check out all the books now that you'll see on witchcraft, all the tarot cards. They said, it's everywhere. This is the hot thing now, where everyone wants to be involved in this. And so in terms of data, it might be a little bit tricky on this. The data may be that people that are involved in this, they don't want to talk about it. It's a very individual thing for them. And that's that's an important point, and we'll get to that. But they take this in a very individualistic way. That's why there is a kind of attraction to this. All right. So, Simon, if you would please, let's go ahead and play the first video. I want you guys to watch this. All right. These are all real short.
But why? Isn't paganism outdated? Wasn't it the religion of uneducated people who knew little else? Well, that's to be debated. One could argue the same for most religions. But if we look a little closer, it's clear that paganism is in line with many of the values and concerns that many people tend to gravitate toward. For one thing, most people are seeking spiritual paths that emphasize a close connection with nature and ancient wisdom. As environmental concerns grow, paganism's reverence for the earth resonates with people who want to cultivate a more sustainable and harmonious relationship with the natural world. Paganism also provides a more flexible and personal spiritual practice, which appeals to people who may be disillusioned with the dogma and institutional aspects of mainstream religions. Another factor is the increasing interest in ancestry and heritage. People are looking to reconnect with the beliefs and practices of their ancestors, finding a sense of identity and belonging in ancient traditions. And the rise of the internet and social media has made it easier for like-minded individuals to connect, share information, and build communities around pagan practices.
All right, so this one video, and I mean, you can go and Google all of this stuff. You can go on YouTube or whatever and just say, like, why is paganism becoming so important? Why is Wicca becoming so important? All of these different things will explain that this is real. And the number of views of many of these videos by self-appointed witches and so forth, they are in the millions. They are in the hundreds of thousands, right? You'll see this, okay? Dave Davis says, is this a fad for some people like it was in the 1970s with Parker Brothers Ouija boards? I think I've talked about that even in terms of people becoming Orthodox. I worry about just fads in general. Social media and the internet engenders fads. Western people like fads. They get bored with something very quickly. They want to do something and then they move on to something else. And I don't know if it's our consumer mentality. Well, I've already done this. I don't need to do this again. I want something new. We have how many streaming services now with how many tens or hundreds of thousands of videos, all of this stuff on all of these streaming services, and yet there's nothing to watch, right? That's the joke. 10,000 movies and there's nothing to watch. So in a way, these fads may in fact come and go, but they are scratching a kind of spiritual itch for certain types of people. And we have to be careful specifically about, I would say, young women who are, just like young men, who are very impressionable when it comes to these things. Very impressionable. Young men have their own problem. We're going to talk about the bro culture next week, okay? So everybody that's all upset about today's topic, come back next week. And then other people will be upset about next week. But we have to be concerned about this. There are former Christians, and you have to admit this. I'm not saying everyone that is involved in witchcraft and paganism and whatever it is they're doing, spells and magic and Ouija boards and tarot cards, they're not all women, but indeed they are predominantly women who are interested in this and who are making all the videos and all the social media posts. No doubt about it. Okay? It's just a fact. So let's look at this slide number 3 here, and then we're going to look at another video. So slide number 3 basically says that when we talk about these particular spiritual movements, and again, they certainly, in a certain sense, have ancient roots, right? But there would be certain criteria that seem to come back again and again when they say, what religions, what spiritualities, what philosophies are we talking about here when we talk about neo-paganism, witchcraft, the occult, divination, right? I'm not just focusing on one thing. And if you're an expert in witchcraft, forgive me, because I know that I'm lumping you all together. But they have a kind of common thread to them, which seems to be the attractiveness for some people. For instance, number 1, these movements are specifically not, and this is the term that they use, Abrahamic, meaning they're not Christianity, they're not Judaism, and they're not, according to them, Islam. Okay? In other words, they are not organized religions that are common in Western countries. That's one of the things that seems to be attractive to some people. And where you lump all of these types of spiritual practices together. They're not organized religions. They're not Abrahamic religions. They claim, number 2, that these practices predate Christianity. And indeed, our church history, our Orthodox faith is very clear. And we're going to look at some of this where the fight, you might say, against paganism, the push against paganism within Christianity is front and center, And I remember one time somebody asked me, they said, well, it seems wrong. Why did Christians destroy pagan idols and pagan statues and pagan temples, right? Why did they do that? And the answer is because it is demonic. That's why. It was the victory of Christ over the demons. And so they destroyed these things. Now, to a Western mind, it's like, well, wait a second, there's freedom of religion. It's like, well, 2,000 years ago, there wasn't freedom of religion. How many millions of Christians have been killed? So just understand that, yes, some of these things predate Christianity, but they are being given new life, right? And one of the aspects of this kind of spirituality and religion is that they seem to use rituals that are centered on the earth, right? They're centered on creation. This is what St. Paul says in Romans 1, by the way, right? St. Paul speaks about paganism, and he says that they see the existence of God in the creation. They just look around and they see God. It says, and even though they saw his handiwork, they refused to acknowledge him as God. It said, instead, they gave themselves over to, and then he talks about, the pagan idols. He says, created like animals, 4-footed animals and birds and fish of the sea and so forth, right? So this idea of worshiping the created order is a hallmark of this kind of neo-paganism and witchcraft. And so we have to recognize that joining into that might be, just relax. Don't get so upset when I say things. But it might be driven by some people who they're going to check these boxes. They're going to say, I don't want to adhere to any organized religion. I don't want to adhere to the common religion of the common man today. I don't want to adhere to Christianity. And then they'll give the reasons. Because, Christianity killed so many people and they caused so many wars, right? That's what they'll say. I'm not saying that's true. That's what they'll say. They'll say, and in fact, point number 2, paganism is older than Christianity. So if I want to be religious, isn't older better? So I'm doing something that's actually before Christianity. It's actually better than Christianity because it's older than Christianity. And they'll say, just relax, I'm saying this. They'll say, we have to save the earth. That the earth is going to, and they just fill in the blanks. It's going to explode, or it's going to freeze over, or whatever it is, or the tides are going to rise and everybody's going to die. And therefore, we have to worship Mother Nature. We have to bring ourselves to recognize how important the creation is. And so they have all of these reasons affirming their, desire to be witches or to, undergo this sort of spirituality of paganism, witchcraft, et cetera, et cetera. All right? All right. Video number 2, very short clip. This is kind of sad. This is very sad. Look at these beautiful young women, and there's going to be just a minute clip, former Christians who got together and they have left their Christian faith and they are now all witches. Video number 2. Watch this.
Fact, witches.
Whatever the situation calls for. So if you come to me with pleasantries, you being respectful, you'll get Glinda, the good witch of the suburbs. But if you come at me with negativity and meanness and disrespect, then you'll get Eveline. Your worst nightmare.
They have many names and titles and ranks within their belief system. They are college-educated professional women who've chosen to believe that theirs is a truer example of worship that is inclusive of the genders. It connects them, they say, to their ancestors and fills a need not found in traditional worship, though most of them grew up in the church.
I was raised Christian, all Christians in my family. In fact, my grandfather was a preacher in the South.
I also grew up Christian. I grew up Anglican in the Episcopal Church. The older I got, the more disconnect I felt.
I was raised Baptist. My father is a deacon, my mom a deaconess. I was in church.
Yeah, see? It's a thing. It's a thing. And it's very sad because they have certain reasons why. They don't talk about why. We're going to get to that in a second. But they just say, yeah, we were raised in the church, but we're leaving it because we feel like this type of spirituality is more meaningful to us, right? That's what's happening. So, slide number 4. Slide number 4. Why is there this interest? Now, again, let's just all breathe. Why is there this interest? Now, we have to think about just the last 10 years, the last 15 years. This has been something that has been really only for about the last 10 or 15 years. And there are a lot of shifts going on in our world. There are shifts in cultures. There are shifts in migration. There are shifts in politics. There are shifts in the workplace. All of these things are happening, and they are driving people to look at life in a way that maybe they didn't have before. Catherine McCord asked, are we going to talk to a woman in this podcast? You bet we are. It's coming up right now. Just hold on. Okay, so why is there this interest in this kind of spirituality? Well, I think you can at least focus on about 3 things. 3 things. In other words, this is, at least in the first two matters, this is reactionary. Reactionary. It is a reactionary movement to those who feel that that this is something that they have to do because, number one, they want to reject Christianity. Why? Because Christianity is the cause of all of the problems in this world. Christians, they say, hate gay people. Christians hate, they say, women. They don't like women. Christians start all the wars in the world. And therefore, we want a religion that is in not only different from Christianity, but entirely opposed to Christianity. Entirely opposed to Christianity. Okay? And the second thing, as I said, is that within these spiritual movements of paganism, witchcraft, etc., there seems to be a kind of, and again, I'm just reporting it, there seems to be a perception of female empowerment. That females kind of take the lead in this. That, for instance, the earth is Mother Earth. And so we're going to worship Mother Earth. We're going to worship a female pagan goddess, you see, because we want to eschew the patriarchy of the last 2,000 years, or whatever it is, 4,000, 7,000, 200. We want to free ourselves from the patriarchal oppression of everything that men have done to oppress women. Now, let me stop right here and say, I want all of the naysayers to listen carefully. I never have denied that women at certain times in certain places have been oppressed. I've never denied that. What I am saying is that this spiritual movement is perceived in such a way to be empowering to women because Christianity is not empowering to women. And what I will say is that is wrong. That is a misperception of Christianity. It's wrong. And we're going to talk more about that next week when we talk about the guys and we talk about bro culture and the problem with it. Not healthy, biblical masculinity. We're going to talk about the distortion of that kind of hyper masculinity and the damage it has done. But that's next week. So there seems to be a driving force that says that women are oppressed by the prevailing patriarchy. I was talking to somebody last week and I said, it's ironic because I was in business for 30 years. I worked at some of the largest companies in the world. I was a consultant. I was a teacher. And I said, I had nothing but women bosses. I always had a woman boss. I don't know why, but I always did. And, I don't see like this in the same way that people do. Nevertheless, the final point is that these practices allow people to make it very personal. In other words, when you go to the church, when you become an Orthodox Christian, you go to the corporate worship and we're all going to fast together and we're all going to sing together and we're all going to pray together. And then when you go home, you're going to do the prayers that everybody else does, see? And you're going to use the ritual that everybody else does. And this week, we're going to read the gospel that everybody else does. But in these types of movements, there's a more personalized spirituality. And there's a lot of videos out there that say that, oh, you can take this in any direction you want. You can be a green witch, or you can be a kitchen witch, or you can, and they list all of these different kinds of things. You can be a black witch, you can be a white witch, not skin color, but the type of witch. And you just let it go where you need it to go. So if you need to write a spell or create a potion for whatever, getting back at somebody or getting a better job or getting more money or whatever it is, this allows you to just do your thing, do whatever you want, and you don't have to answer to anybody. So that's why there seems to be interest in this. Now, yes, the next two short videos that I'm going to show you, some of you are going to get triggered, but again, here it is. Okay. This is out there, and it seems to jive with what some people that follow this seem to think about witchcraft, etc., being an empowering thing to females. Simon, go ahead and play video number 3. It's real short. Actually, this one's a little bit longer, minute and a half.
Oh, witches is just another word for women, strong, self-aware, intelligent women who refuse to be silenced. That's what they called witches. Look, for centuries, women who practiced medicine, midwifery, or herbal healing were accused of witchcraft. They held wisdom and influence in these male-dominated power structures, and the men didn't like it. So they needed to vilify these women, these strong, generally older, independent women who held power without a husband, who understood healing and nature better than the clergy, who challenged the authority. They were branded a witch as a way to discredit her and control her. But as somebody who has a degree in biblical studies, I don't see it any different than Christianity. Jesus was a blood sacrifice, which mirrored lots of ancient rituals where offerings were made to gods for protection or forgiveness or blessings. Communion would be labeled witchcraft, right? It's the symbolic consumption of Christ's blood and body.
All right. So obviously she got it wrong at the end because she's saying, oh, look, witches have rituals, witchcraft has rituals, and Christianity has rituals. Witches have sacrifices and Christianity has sacrifices, right? It's just the same thing. But that part, I mean, you know, watch Lord of Spirits. You'll figure that out really fast. That's just ignorance on her part. But what she says at the beginning, it's interesting how she frames it. She said that women aren't the problem. That women who were smart and independent and healers and being relied on, and they weren't married and they didn't need a man, and they stood up to the leadership, right? They were considered by the men to be witches. That's what she said. In other words, what she's saying is that the reason why we have these attitudes today is because of the way men treated strong, independent women in the past as witches. Now, that's kind of a little ridiculous, but that's the perception. Okay? And then the last video, this one's really short. The last video here, and then we're going to talk to our guest. All right? Last video about, and this, she's called like the Wicked Witch of the World Wide Web.
Burning,
big.
Hanging, beheading. Burning, hanging, beheading, stoning, slavery, racism, sexism, genocide, and general oppression. All of these things were once deemed socially acceptable. Just because something is socially acceptable does not mean that it is morally just. Be smart enough to follow your own moral compass regardless of what everyone else is doing. If you follow the herd, you will end up at slaughter.
And obviously, you know, her handle on YouTube and so forth is that she's a witch. And she's trying to dress the part there, I think. And she's basically saying that oppression of women is nothing new, that it's happened forever, right? And so women need to buck up and they need to empower themselves to fight against that. Okay? All right. So now we're going to bring online, I'm keeping her name anonymous. There were several people that said, well, why aren't you talking to women? You should be talking to women. Now, I mean, women are free to give their opinions and talk at any time, always. However, I want you to listen to this young woman. We're going to have a conversation. And she was involved in this. And now she is an Orthodox Christian. Okay. Not going to give you her name, but she's very articulate. And I'm going to bring her on. All right. So, Simon, Mike, let's bring our guest on. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi,
So
Father.
thank you very much for joining us. And I appreciate this very much. So I want our listeners online, the people in the chat, also the people in the chat, I'm sure that our young speaker here will take some questions. So if you have questions for her, we're gonna talk for about 10 or 15 minutes. So if you would like to have a question to her, I will try to find some questions that you give to her. Please let me know and we'll try to move those on. All right. So the first question that I want to ask you is, and this is my concern, why is there, well, first of all, am I making any of this up? Is what I presented false? In other words, is the movement of young women becoming interested, I'm not saying it's universal, but is the movement of young women toward paganism, toward witchcraft, toward the occult, toward tarot cards, toward crystals, towards New Age, right? Is this real? And if it's real, why is it happening?
So, thank you, first of all, for asking me to come on. And there isn't anything that has been said so far in this episode that I have disagreed with. This is happening, and uniquely right now, it's been happening a lot more. I was more involved around 10 years ago, and what you were saying about it being like commercially available for the youth in these stores, it's been as I've been coming out of any of those practices that it's been available. And it was shocking to me to like go into a bookstore and see categories of witchcraft and tarot on sale at Walmart in bookstores. It is very much being catered to right now for these vulnerable people. 10 years ago, it was all online. I mean, there were books available. I remember downloading one on Kindle, but it was more kind of a niche thing where now it's kind of been built up for the past at least a decade. And realistically, if you like look back through the history of the occult in media, I mean, it started in movies, you know, before they were even talkies. And then in the 40s, there were all of these like seances and stuff happening in movies and everything. And over time, it just got built into being a little bit more accessible, and culminating in now it's the thing to be.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about your involvement in it? Without, and I want to protect your anonymity, but without giving any specific details, talk a little bit about what you found attractive about witchcraft and neo-paganism, and why were you attracted to it, right? Why were you attracted to it?
Right. So I was raised not Orthodox, and in a Christian background, and I'd had experiences with, the only thing that I could think of then was, like ghosts or demons or whatever. And in my background, it was kind of just, brushed aside. And like my parents had also had experiences with what they called ghosts. And it was kind of disconnected from our faith. It was just like this other reality happening alongside like our Catholic faith as I was being, and they were completely separate. So if I ever had any question about like actual experiences I was having, it was brushed aside as, imagination or whatever, when really I know that what I was experiencing was, there is a spiritual realm that whether we know we're interacting with it or not, is happening to us and around us. So when I didn't get any answers from my faith, obviously you go searching, you find other people who have had experiences, and you see, the secular media with, their TV shows, their movies, explaining it as, these demons that you can talk to or you can control. And it led me toward trying to take some sort of control over what was happening to me at the time. And I had kind of fallen disillusioned with my faith for a number of reasons. And that's probably another thing that draws women toward it, is you're in this echo chamber on TikTok, which wasn't really a thing when I was doing this. You're in this echo chamber where you're told that you're oppressed and you have no agency. So you have to find your own agency. And I don't necessarily know that I ever went in for the, like, I'm personally oppressed because of the patriarchy kind of thing, at least not for very long, but it does kind of feed into, you need to take your own individualized approach to the world and stand your own kind of ground. And we know that like beauty has an impact on our hearts, very much so. And since the Harry Pottering of everything, all of this witchcraft stuff has been made to look beautiful. And frankly, women love, I'm not speaking for all women, but a lot of women that I knew loved the aesthetics of it and would fill their lives with just the surface level of this witchery, but then like fall into it a little more and a little more. But do I personally, yeah, that definitely like took a toll on me, like filling my space with it just kind of like encourages you to interact with it more,
Yes. Yeah. So you found the personalization, interacting with it, to be very very helpful for you in the time of your life that you were in, right?
Right. Yeah.
All right. So, and also I want to remind the folks in the chat, because I do see some people having a conversation about various things, but if you have a question for our guest, feel free to put it in there. Just mark it as, question to the guest. What I did want to ask you is eventually you did get out of this, right?
Right.
Eventually you did get out of this. Before we talk about that, just one second. I think it was you, or it might have been somebody else, telling me about the worship of the goddess Hecate. Did you were you telling me about that?
That one might not have been me, but
okay, because I have several.
I also know.
Yeah, I have several women that told me that they had worshipped the goddess Hecate, and there is there's a lot of there's a lot of disagreement about who that is, whether it's Diana or whatever, but Hecate seems to be very popular with feminists that are involved in this. Can you just tell me a little bit about that and why this goddess Hecate seems to be so important?
So personally, I was kind of not too interested in the structure of the gods and goddesses of any particular pantheon, but Hecate, she is like the goddess of witchcraft. So she's kind of the one that people would lean on for like this mother. There's like the idea of like the maiden mother crone thing, and she's the mother in the middle of it. I don't really have too much to speak on her in particular because I was kind of experiencing most of my involvement with witchcraft through a lens of irony. It was more for me just about being anti-Christian and tapping into the like powers of nature and less about any particular, because you can align yourself with any pantheon, any god or goddess you wanted to. It's very much like you're loading in at a video game character creation, and you just go with whatever feels right for you. You pick this patron god, this patron goddess, and you can customize your worship to them. There are like structured rituals and stuff, but she is the one that most people like draw on for power from what I experienced. I didn't look too in depth into pantheons or anything.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm just looking up something here, and it says she's considered the world mother, the torch bearer. She's tenacious and extremely powerful and loving. So you could see why someone who is involved in that might be drawn to such a thing. So we do have some questions from the chat. The first one is from Blue Lazarou. Says, did the good you thought happening, I assume that means from being a witch or being involved in witchcraft, that is, did the good that you thought happening flip to bad happenings, and that sent you looking to Jesus?
Actually, yeah. Like I said, I had been participating in magic, mostly ironically, and it was when it started working that it started to alarm me. And myself, and I was, even though I was doing it ironically, I was the head of a small coven at university. The people around me were also experiencing all of these positives that they felt they were enacting in themselves, while also having these like runs of horrible luck, or like almost all of them had like wildly crippling mental health problems. And I started to see them as related. And it was actually like I had been kind of pulling away from any witchcraft or anything. And I had a reason for a like 17-hour long panic attack, which I recognized was like a spiritual attack. And that actually led me to start praying to God again. And I'm not saying that everything was magically healed, because I started, acknowledging God, but it brought me comfort in a way that felt different to the like temporary highs of whatever magic I was engaging in. And I had already been introduced to orthodoxy at that time and been slowly coming around to the idea of not being so anti-Christian. And I was praying from like a perspective of, I don't know what it means to be Orthodox, but I'm going to try to pray to God from that kind of angle. And it helped.
Right. That's wonderful. Anthe T asks, at what age were you drawn to the occult?
Actually in stages, but very early. When I was about 12 years old, I was watching the show Bewitched, And they seemed like, right, it seemed so innocuous, but they seemed like these little gods unto themselves, and they were beautiful about it. And it drew me to that. And at the same time, I had like a personal trauma, and felt like I needed some control. So there was Bewitched. And then I started looking into other media like Buffy the Vampire Slayer or whatever, and felt drawn to this darkness and control that you could have from the darkness. And it wasn't until later on in high school that I actually started trying to engage with it.
Thank you. Two more questions, and then we're going to wrap it up. How much, this is from George. I'm sorry. First for Jacob Kinley. Is there typically a stage between leaving Christianity and pursuing witchcraft, as in a period of atheism or agnosticism?
I feel like every experience is different. Some people are going to get smacked in the face with, you now have crossed a line and have to acknowledge that what's happening is wrong and turn around, like a road to Damascus kind of thing. But for me, it was kind of the other way, where I was kind of ironically engaging with this and had like this atheism underlying that I kind of fell into for a while still engaging in this. And I feel like it could be, some people are going to turn straight around and some people are going to get disillusioned, just as like they get disillusioned with anything else. There was actually a woman in my coven who identified as a Christian witch. She had Christian belief, but didn't feel like there was any like magic or spark in Christianity. So she supplemented that with witchcraft. So I feel like everybody comes from a different background, and everybody is going to find a road to God through a different means.
That's crazy. That's crazy. Last question from George says, how much unity or disunity is there in occultist practices? Are there big factions, or is it more of an a la carte thing?
It really spans. There are factions that have, structured ritualistic behavior, and they tend to not necessarily be strict, but have ways that you should align with to be part of their belief group. But what's really popularized right now is more of an a la carte version, and it's being spread through this like self-love and this false love kind of narrative through social media like TikTok and everything, where the Wiccan read is, do what ye will as it harm none. So what they believe is harm is, the typical physical, but like they don't look at like what we look at as love, they see as harmful. Like the gentle correction of, no, maybe that belief is going to damage you spiritually, is you telling them not to pursue something that is their truth. So there's more of this false love being total acceptance as long as it's not Christianity.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That
exactly.
As long as you're not going like non-consensually doing blood rituals on someone else, though, they'll sacrifice a chicken here or there, but they thank the chicken for it.
Yeah. Right. But
it's more of, you can do whatever you want. And then there's like, that's even perpetuated by the like this satanic layer of it, where like if you ever look into like what people who are Satanists, like they say they don't worship Satan, they just believe the satanic rite. It's all just about doing what you want as long as you're not hurting anybody else. It's really twisted.
Yeah, that's a common trope, right? Like, do whatever you want as long as you're not hurting anybody else. Talk about, sexual things in the culture and so forth. So I want to throw a curveball. I'm going to ask you one last question. It has to do with you becoming an Orthodox Christian. So I don't know if you've been in the live chat, but there's I'm getting a little bit of shade thrown at me to say, like, well, why did you say, like, could this be a reason why young women aren't becoming Orthodox? And I think, there's like a little bit of a disconnect there. In other words, what I'm trying to say is, if there is a young, here's the bottom line for me. And I want everybody that thinks that I was wrong to listen to what I'm saying here. If there is a big interest in spirituality among young women, but that interest in spirituality is Wicca and witchcraft and paganism and crystals and tarot cards and, whatever, right? And at the same time, we have a movement where young families, where young men are coming into the church, but what we are not seeing is young women at the same rate. Is there a relationship there? That's the question. I'm not saying, are they becoming witches? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, as you are now an Orthodox Christian, and now you said you personally didn't base your witchcraft on sort of like an anti-patriarchal thing, although I think you said that you had undergone abuse and so forth, or what you perceive that to be. Now that you are an Orthodox Christian, are you, and I want you to be honest about this, are you seeing within Orthodoxy the oppression of women as an important principle? Are you understanding Orthodox Christianity to be essentially oppressive to women?
No, not at all. And I really think that it would be impossible for someone who has the beliefs that they are pursuing this kind of self-serving paganism. Their beliefs are just simply not going to be compatible with Orthodoxy. Try to ask someone who feasts and does whatever they want in other manners, and try to ask them to have some sort of asceticism and give themselves over to God in any kind of sacrifice. It's just not going to be compatible. There isn't a patriarchal, there is the thing that does scare women these days is they're being screamed at to deny the patriarchy power over them. But that's not what's happening in Orthodoxy. You're asked to love God through what you do, and it's not imposed upon you. And that's coming from someone who I choose to cover my head, but it's not because someone is threatening me if I don't. It's all what you feel you can do at where you are to glorify God and to shape yourself into more of what God wants you to be. It's not a patriarchy forcing me to do anything.
So there's a comment from Cat, C-A-T, in the comment section that is addressed to me, but I'll address it to you. And it says, Father, young women have already been vocal about why we feel unwelcome at church and why we feel our sisters are not joining us. This keeps getting dismissed. Now, she didn't really, I assume she said our sisters. So I'm not sure why she didn't list these things, but I'm going to assume that it is things like because there are young men who are maybe speaking down to women. Maybe they're doing it online and they're feeling unwelcomed. Maybe they have had things said to them in church where they feel disrespected. And again, I'm just sort of guessing. I would say another thing is that maybe these young women feel like they are being neglected or overlooked in some way, where the young men get to serve and do that, but the young women don't. The young men get to wear robes, but the young women don't. I don't know. So, Kat, I apologize because I'm trying to sort of like read your mind here. But the point is, you know, what do you feel? So Catherine McCord here says, and I'm just reading this live. It says, I think you're missing the point by not talking about how women are treated in the church. Yes, by men, you're not taking women's concerns seriously. So for you, guest, what do you think these women's concerns are? Because I keep hearing about women's concerns, but nobody will say what it is. Like right now, they said it before. I'm trying to I'm trying to guess what that is. I'm assuming it is somebody mistreated them at church. Somebody said something to them that was rude. Some young man, made them feel unwelcomed, or made a rude comment to them, or treated them like chattel, or whatever it is. Okay, obviously these things are wrong, and the priest should address that. But what I'm trying to understand, and I want you to help me through this, is what do you think? Think about old you 15, 20 years ago, right? Think about old you. What would you have said that is the problem that's keeping you from church?
I mean, it would probably be about the structure of the misconception of what it means to like listen to the man as the head of the family, I would assume. Because that doesn't necessarily mean that everything he says goes and there's no input from you. You are just woman, do as I say.
Which, by the way, is a misunderstanding, and I'll talk about it next week, because that particular trope is very easily dismissed to say that, men have all the power and women don't. Okay. But, right. So there's that. And Kat says, thank you, Father. I mostly mean inappropriate male behavior and incorrect theology being promoted by young male catechumens, new converts. They learn this online, try to preach it at church. Okay. But Kat, I want you to come back next week and let's talk about it. But the point is this, those are things that can be corrected. All right. So what else? What else do you think?
I think it just sounds like these women are having experiences one-on-one with individuals in the parishes. I don't know what structurally is keeping them away. Yeah. or online. I don't,
right.
I'm not following exactly what the...
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to talk about that next week, and I'm being reminded that we've kind of gone off topic a little bit, so thank you very much. All right, so guests, thank you very much. God bless you. Welcome to the Orthodox faith. You know that God loves all of his creation, and he wants them to live in union with him. So I'm glad that you came out of the grips of this occultic practice and that you've embraced the Orthodox faith, and may God continue to bless you. Okay.
Thank you, Father.
Thanks for joining us. All right. So I want to do this real quick. Last slide, and then we're going to wrap it up. Last slide, and we're going to wrap it up. This last slide here, thanks for everybody for your comments. Thanks for your patience. Yes, we were all over the place today, but it's not an easy topic. And if If people were offended by the way that the description was posed, I apologize. What I'm saying, and I'll say it one last time, is there is interest in spirituality among young women. It just seems to be not Christianity, right? Not orthodoxy. That's what I'm saying. I think it's a fair question. It's a fair question. So I want to know, why are young women interested in this, but they're not interested in Orthodox Christianity? If they're being mistreated at church, that's wrong. Go to the priest. Tell them to stop. This is not right. We're gonna talk about it next week. All right. So we're gonna talk about, this is very short. We're going to look at the life of Saint Marina of Antioch, or Margaret of Antioch, and she lived in the late 4th century. So she was killed somewhere near the end of the 200s, like 284 to 305. And she lived in Turkey in the 4th century. Her father was a pagan priest. Her mother died in childbirth, and because of that, she was kind of unwanted. She was abandoned by her father. She was left in the care of a nurse, and even the nurse was discharged. And so while she was a teenager, Marina made a vow of chastity to God. And one day, while Marina was tending sheep, a Roman prefect attempted to seduce her. So again, I understand that men behave badly sometimes, right? They behave badly. So this story of Saint Marina is actually acknowledging this. A Roman prefect attempted to seduce her. When she refused his advances, she was denounced as a Christian. Upon refusing to sacrifice to the pagan gods, she was subjected to various tortures, including being beaten with clubs and her skin being raked with iron combs. One rather interesting torment included plunging Marina into a cauldron of boiling water, out of which she came unharmed, singing praises to God. After being imprisoned again, the devil tried to frighten her 3 times. Once, as a dragon, he attempted to eat her. And this demon held half of her body in his mouth. She prayed, she made the sign of the cross, and the beast was ripped apart, and it vanished. Again, the beast appeared as a man to her. This devil appeared as a man to her. And it was black. The man was black as night, it says. Not a black man, but just appeared very black. She seized his hair, beat him with a hammer until he left her sight. Again, this demon grabbed her and threatened to kill her if she would not stop praying. So she whipped him, and finally a light appeared from heaven in the form of a cross. A white dove told her to rejoice, for she had vanquished the enemy and was completely healed. Eventually, she was beheaded at the age of 16 around the year 304, and she is known as the vanquisher of demons, having been abused by men, and she was killed for her faith. She is a tremendous example of a strong, independent, God-loving woman. This is the most important thing that we have to remember about Saint Marina, a wonderful icon of a woman who's not taken anything from anybody. She's a lover of God, she's a lover of Christ, and she was a Christian until the very end of her life. That's the kind of spirituality that is worthy of emulation, that is worthy of pursuit. Young women, if you are listening to this program, we love you. We care about you. We do not want you to feel frowned upon. We don't want you to feel less than anyone else. You are as worthy as anyone of every spiritual blessing in Christ. Just like the men have a role, you have a role in the church, an essential role, an important role. God will reveal that role to you. Never let anyone think that somehow you are less of a person because you are a woman. But you do not need this kind of demonic nonsense in the form of witchcraft, neo-paganism, tarot cards, crystals, Ouija boards. Throw that garbage out. Burn it. Get rid of it. Turn to Christ. Turn to Christ. He will make you the woman that God wants you to be, not a woman that is constantly answering to everybody else. You will be a woman who will be a servant of Christ, just like men are servants of Christ. Don't turn to witchcraft. Turn to the destroyer of witchcraft, the victor over evil and sin and death, and that is the Lord Jesus Christ. Next week, we're talking about the guys. Is the bro culture and orthodoxy compatible? Is orthodoxy simply about making bros, about guys getting strong, lifting weights? Is that what it's about? So all the naysayers, I'll see you next week. That's our show for tonight. Remember to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Ancient Faith Today. Share out our program after it's posted. Give us your feedback. Hey, while you're in here, you guys, there's so many of you, hit the like button. I know some of you won't hit it, but hit the like button. Let's get that viewership up. All right? Join us next Tuesday. It's going to be a good one for Ancient Faith Today. Good night, everybody.